Hello, humane marketers. Sarah Znakrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hey, Tamas, good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you again.
We're saying again because we've had this conversation before and it was amazing. And then the sound wasn't so amazing. So we decided to record it again. And it's been a few months. You've been traveling, mountain climbing. And so, I can't say I've forgotten it because there was, some things that are like really got me thinking, but it's also good to have the conversation again. So we're talking about meaningful conversations. So maybe you can start there and just like in the last few months, you told me you've been outdoors a lot. And tell us a little bit about that. Were you the leader of these groups outdoors, or were you a participant on these outdoor experiences? And how does the meaningful conversations fit into that experience?
Mhm. Wow, such a great question. Thank you so much. Uh, so the last couple of months, I've been mostly doing this extreme activity called highlining, meaning that we put a tightrope or a slack line in the mountains between 2 points that are currently not connected. And we go on an operation to set this thing up. And then once it's up there, we get on it and we stand up and we balance and walk. And it's
Hmm. I can just imagine it. Yeah.
and in the last 3 months, I've been involved in a big project in Greece. We set up one of these highlines, which was 1 kilometer long on the top of the Vikos Gorge, which is one of the deepest gorges of Europe. And the beauty of this is that a number of people come together, and many of these people don't know each other from earlier, and they just have a common passion. And somehow this project team gets to put together with a very loose hierarchical structure. So I would say we're more on a flat base. There's not really one single leader, but there is a notion of many people who know a lot. And we need to come together and we need to find a way to put up this high line in a safe manner. And we need to find ways of doing that so it's fast, so it, responds to weather conditions, and that at the end of the day, it's safe to put our lives on. And I'm always super fascinated because somehow this works out very naturally. And what I came to realize this last mission is that one of the reasons why it happens is because we connect to each other human to human. And connecting to each other human to human kind of requires to have um, more than usual or more than normal conversations, meaning that we get to know each other. Who are you? What is your story? What have you been, getting passionate about recently? What are your fears? What are your dreams? So we don't just talk about highlines, but we start really connecting on this deeper sense where we we get to know each other and we build that trust and we build that psychological safety so that when someone makes a mistakes during putting up these highlines or when someone has a different opinion about some safety issues, we are able to go to each other and we are able to communicate. And then we are able to fall back into being human to human and friends with each other so that we can continue having fun together.
Mm.
Yes, I've been having meaningful conversations and I've been using that in the outdoor setting, probably in a much more important way than if I were to use it in a business or an organizational setting.
Yeah, because it's attached to survival,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like your survival depends on these conversations that you're having with other humans. Because I think the minute you can just picture it, the minute the ego comes in there and interferes, and someone comes in there and thinks she has all the answers, then things can go wrong. So it really has to be a communal decision-making process, and that requires human to human conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm.
Such a
Uh,
good point.
that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And the other word you brought up is psychological safety.
Mhm.
So I think that's a really important thing, and you will explain us why. If we want to have meaningful conversations, I think especially in a setting where people don't know each other, right?
Mhm.
But tell us a bit more about psychological safety and what you feel is important there to, yeah, set the space maybe.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's such a topic these days in the organizational field or in the business field on how do we relate to psychological safety. And I think the angle I would like to bring in is that is what I've been researching a lot around what are the boundaries of us showing ourselves in different settings and how does that contribute to psychological safety. Because on the one hand, I do believe that we need to take off the masks. We need to take off the mask that our ego, our mind is putting up to protect ourselves from something. So typically, if you go into, let's say, to a workplace, you don't want to show yourself where you're lacking something because you have a fear that it's going to be used against you. So you are already hiding behind a mask, or maybe you don't want to talk about something that you love doing in your free time, and maybe it deviates a little bit from the mainstream and from the norm. So suddenly there's another mask there. But at the same time, I do need to show something about myself to start building that trust that is the basics of the psychological safety. So many people, including me, are questioning that what is the healthy depth of sharing about myself in certain settings. And it's the same for me when I go into my highlining setting with my friends and my peers. I'm able to share a lot more as opposed to if I go on a gala night at an embassy. And I need to be able to sense and feel what is this social field around me and what kind of questions can I ask in this field that moves beyond the regular question, but still not challenging the people in that setting too much so that they are still comfortable giving an answer to that question, which will generate a meaningful conversation. And to me,
Right.
this is the aspect that comes up with psychological safety the most, that whoever is in a position of bringing different relational connections into that field, they need to be aware of what is the quality of that field, where are people, where is the audience in that field, and how can they be challenged so that they feel that discomfort of being challenged, but they still feel trusted and safe to start leaning into it. And from there, you can start building more depth because with that, you will start talking about norms, about agreements, and you start slowly creating a space where you can be more of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there really is different spaces that can be redefined how they feel safe, right? Uh, like for example, I'm talking about a new business intimacy, and and that means that we can kind of question maybe our assumptions, how intimacy should look like in a business setting, and then redefine a new business intimacy that feels good for that group in that specific situations. And then in that setting, we can have meaningful conversations. But that might look different from one workplace to the other. And of course, it's very different, if you compare work compared to a friend setting
Hmm.
where then it's not business intimacy, but friendship intimacy.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think it's important to understand that. Maybe another thing that we should bring up before we go more deeply into this is how do we define a meaningful conversation, right? Like, what to you does that mean?
Wow, good question. And what comes to me straight away is that something that's not cognitive. So
Mm,
something, a meaningful conversation would be for me something that when I'm engaging in that conversation, at the end of it or at some point in the conversation, I start feeling something warm in my
mm,
body. I start feeling something, a sense of kindness, a sense of tingly sensations, knowing that this person in front of me went beyond the usual and shared something that maybe makes them feel vulnerable. Or maybe I start seeing something about their authenticity.
mm,
So you can distill some stuff from that, but again, it's different from person to person because maybe someone is happy to always overshare, and maybe someone is never sharing anything about themselves. And from that standpoint, they went beyond, and I could feel that in my body. And
mm,
that is the meaningful conversation for me at this moment of life.
mm. Yeah, so it's an embodied feeling of what it does to you as the participant in this conversation. Yeah.
Exactly. And that encourages me as a listener to also show more of myself,
Mm-hmm.
be a bit more vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
or share something that has a deep importance to me. And that could be any topic. So it's not like I want to lock out certain topics, but maybe I talk about the usual topics from a very different angle.
Right. Which makes me think, and I really feel that this is the case, that we have kind of lost the art of having meaningful conversations. Definitely in the workspace, but maybe also in other spaces where it now seems like, and I think that's where your who cards come in.
Mhm.
It now seems like we need certain people, role models, if you want to call them that, who's somehow facilitate or create that space to have meaningful conversations. Because otherwise, it's much easier to just stay at the cognitive level all the time.
Mhm.
It feels easier because yeah, because it's not embodied and it doesn't include so much emotions. And so it's just like superficial and it feels easier. It doesn't give you the same, it doesn't have the same risk, but it also doesn't have the same benefits, of
Mhm.
course, right? It doesn't give you that warm, fuzzy feeling to just stay at the cognitive level. But yeah, is that what you noticed as well? That maybe made you then start this project of creating the who cards or yeah, holding more spaces where we can have these conversations.
Mhm. Definitely. And definitely, I've been since the last conversations we had, I've been looking back into my professional life. And one thing that really stood out for me is that I always wanted to have more real conversations in my workplace. And one thing that stood out for me is that I think people really loved being around me is because I was challenging the topics that we were discussing even at the workplace. And this also means that many of the conversations from the field of investment banking to social innovation to the nonprofit world, these are the three major fields I've been involved, most of the time centering around what is that we can achieve together? What is that we do together? Where are we traveling and what type of goals we need to deliver to A, make more profit, or B, make higher social or environmental impact. And on the one hand, we are making more profit, or at least a group of people are making more profit with this in, in the cost of, environmental and social degradation. And on the other hand, you can also see that the social and environmental movement, in a way, is failing the causes because we are not able to respond to the challenges with the speed and with the efficiency that we need to. So something needs to change. And, when I got into this crazy project out of which the Who cars were born, we were challenging the way how we connect when we come together and we start thinking about solving these bigger issues. And we were putting it out there, this idea that if you come to these retreats we were organizing, you were not allowed to talk about what you do. You were not allowed to talk about how to solve these big issues before you talked about who you are.
Mhm.
And we were talking about people from high level, director level of corporates, politicians, artists, actors, social change makers, cleaners, people from all walks of lives. And every single of them were challenged by talking about who they are because we're simply not used to it anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. In a way, it sounds a little bit like a paradox that we need to slow down to speed up.
Mhm.
That's what I understood from what you just said, right?
Yes, and it is a huge paradox, and it's very difficult for the mind to comprehend this paradox.
Right,
We need to slow down and we need to start paying attention.
right,
What's in the room and who's in the room?
right.
What are the stories that they are telling, and how does that inform how I need to, how I should, or how I can connect to this other person? And from that connection, what can naturally emerge? And I'm not
So,
saying,
so tell me more about that. Why do we need to slow down and create these human connections? How
Mhm,
does that help us then speed up?
mhm. I came to believe specifically the last half a year, but this journey has been leading up to this point, is that when we start with the question of what do you do, we really, or what can we achieve together, we really start operating from the rational mind, the analytical mind. And this is only half of our intelligence. When we start connecting to each other, when we challenge ourselves to ask questions like who you are, what makes you smile, are you afraid of death, we start unlocking a deeper sense of this other human in front of me. And with that, we start understanding maybe their underlying emotional world, maybe their underlying intuitive world. And through that, we are creating connections that is not solely relying on the rational mind anymore. It starts stepping into also this other side of our intelligence, which is more non-logical, non-linear, which considers that we are angry, we are sad, we are afraid of climate change. And the potential solutions, the potential collaborations, the potential outcomes that comes from those spaces are going to be more holistic. And I really like this word from one of my teachers, Nicolas Yanni, holistic intelligence. We need to start tapping into that type of intelligence if we want to try to tackle these challenges. Simply speaking, because the rational has not worked out. So we have a chance to tap into something deeper and see what happens. Will it work out? I don't think it's guaranteed. And I cannot say with 100% conviction that it will, but it is a direction that I'm fully convinced that we need to try tapping into.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It feels like we're tapping into the unseen. And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously if it's the unseen, it's unknown whether
Mm-hmm.
it will work out or not. But it's kind of like, the mushrooms with all the little roots. What we see is just a mushroom, but what's underneath is actually the real liaison between the other mushrooms and the trees and the whole forest, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's what we're tapping into by asking the question, who are you, instead of what do you do? So the connection between the humans is much more solid than
Mm-hmm.
just at the surface level. Yeah. um yeah, it's trusting the unseen, right?
Yeah, and the reason why I like that you're bringing in the mushrooms is because we're talking about systems change and behind that systems thinking here. And I really buy into what this weird yet profound German philosopher has been exploring. His name is Nicholas Luhmann, and he said that what we really need to change is the quality of communication between the actors within the system if we want to really see the systems changing. We can't change the actor themselves. They can only work on themselves on their own. And through that, they can change how they relate to each other. And the who cards and the who are you related questions are really focusing on enhancing this quality. So in itself, we are shifting the system around us just by communicating with each other from a different source and a different place.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it all comes back on to the inner work, and
Mhm.
figuring out who we are, and that's what my 7 Ps of humane marketing are all about as well. It's like, well, because I think it's the same thing. We're also a player in a system if we are marketing our services, and if we are the seller and there's buyers out there. Well, if we work on ourselves and we know who we are and we bring that out into the marketplace, in quotation marks, and then we're being a different player. And so therefore the relationships with our clients and suppliers, etc., changes as well, because
Mhm.
it's not in that same typical system anymore where I'm the seller and you're the buyer, but we're all of a sudden kind of like on the same playing field, because I come to this buyer seller equation from a different perspective, from a more holistic perspective. So
Mhm.
I hear what you're saying. It's like it's not the system that you need to change, it's the humans in the system that will then impact the system. And
Mhm.
therefore the meaningful conversations play a big role. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what we did last time is I just picked up a card and then
Mhm.
we had a conversation around that card. So I'm going to do that again. And last time it was dancing, so that was fun because we got to dance. This time
Yeah.
it's something else. So yeah. So the question is, what is a topic that is difficult for you to talk about at the moment?
Mm.
Not the easiest question, right?
Mm.
So we can both still decide, okay, well, we can have this meaningful conversation just one on one, or we can have it on the podcast. But Yeah, let you decide that.
Yeah, and you can also invite in an idea of how deep, I want to share,
Right,
how deep you want to share to this question, because then the responsibility really sits with the person who receives the question.
right.
And I myself am happy to answer this question with what's true to me at the moment. Um, I've been a butterfly for the last 10 years. I've been leading a fairly nomadic lifestyle, um, living in New Zealand, in Hungary, in Switzerland, in Taiwan, and then in many other places. And on the one hand, I really enjoy living an adventurous lifestyle. And on the other hand, I just very recently I had to really realize that I have a deep fear in me to ground and to settle down because I'm fearing to face the discomfort that comes with living a life that, from time to time has boredom in it.
Mm,
And boredom makes humans and makes me realize that often I'm alone, or often things maybe don't have any meaning, or yeah, maybe there is some sort of a sadness there that I haven't truly allowed myself to feel.
mhm,
And it has been difficult to discuss this topic, and it just been coming up very strongly. And what I'm learning now is that once I'm allowing myself to feel whatever is below this topic, suddenly there is a sense of release, and with that comes a sense of space, which then grounds me more in my purpose to do this kind of work, which is not an easy work, because our mind is often cannot see the imagination that a different way of living or a different road is possible.
mhm,
And I'm happy you asked this question because I've been on this journey and now it feels like that suddenly it's becoming lighter to talk about this.
mhm.
So maybe there's a sense of shift happening in there.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense. Well,
Mm.
thank you for sharing.
Thanks for listening. How
Yeah.
about you?
Mhm. Yeah, there's several small things that I'm thinking about. What's very present right now, and I haven't, talked about it to too many people, or it's kind of like this intimacy thing that I explained earlier. It's like, well, it's a topic that I talk about with, friends and family, but not necessarily like on a podcast or with my clients, etc. But we just went through um, this journey with our son, our eldest, who we knew for a while now that he's probably on the autistic spectrum, and he's 21, and he wanted to get a diagnosis because he just felt like it would help him to know. And so we just gone through that this week, and it was quite emotional. It was like at the same time we really wanted it to hear it, that it's clear for him, and at the same time it's like, oof, what a relief as parents also to know why maybe has been quite challenging,
Mhm.
because there's just something wired differently in him and always has been, and for us parents, yeah, it was not easy because we didn't know all these years. So
Mhm.
just yeah, kind of my husband and I gave each other a big hug and high five and saying, "Wow, look at us. We did that, right? We
Mhm.
somehow managed." And he's grown into a very smart adult, and it's like helpful for him to have this diagnosis now because he feels like, oh, I understand myself more, right? This is what we're talking about here. Knowing who we are is really helpful to us, and I think the younger generation, they start way earlier. For I was joking with my husband in the car. It's like my parents, they're in their 70s, and I feel like just right now they're finally understanding who they are. And then our generation, I feel like I started probably understanding who I was when I was 40. And
Hmm.
this generation, the young ones today, they're starting at 20, right?
Hmm.
And good for them because yeah, it really makes life much easier if you don't have to mask
Hmm.
everywhere. So yeah, that's what's present for me right now.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing.
Thank
For
you.
sharing.
Yeah.
And you know what comes to me just as a quick reflection is that this work and these questions are definitely traveling on two dimensions, and one is the self-awareness and then the relational awareness. And I think
Mm,
it's Eric
mhm,
Fromm who said in The Art of Loving that paradoxically you need to start loving being alone and looking inside to be able to start loving each other, meaning that to be able to start connecting to each other.
yeah, that's beautiful. Mm. So to get back to maybe kind of the business setting or even yeah, let's call it the business setting. Like what's two things? What's your aspiration with,
Hmm.
bringing these conversations into the business world? And then after that, maybe we can, because my audience, they're small business owners, right? They're usually not working in the corporate setting. How can small business owners be these role models maybe and have more of these meaningful conversations with their clients or with their peers or things like that?
Hmm. So yeah, our aspirations are quite large at the moment. So we're super happy that families and friends are buying these cars from us. And then we're going beyond that as well. So we're predominantly looking at the moment, working with events and conferences to turn their gatherings more human. This is something that keeps coming up over and over again. And also, what keeps coming up is that even if the promise is there that this conference is going to be more human, there is something lacking in delivery. And so we're looking at these places to actually show people, leaders, businessmen, organizational humans that there is a sense of quality and profit or a return on investment when you start having these meaningful conversations and give them a taster so they can then decide, is this something for my organization? Am I ready to have more authentic connections? Because a lot of
Mhm.
organizations are not, and that is okay, but many are. And so we want to find those organizations, those leaders to work with, to really bringing into their cultural DNA once they get a bit of a taster in a conference or in an event. So that's for us, and that's an exciting journey because we are building, a team based on human connections. We've been working on this for 7 years. We are in for the long game, and we are taking it slow. But as we go along, our human connections are so beautifully flourishing, and so many nice mindset shifting moments are happening to us that I think each of us in the team are appreciating to be doing business in such a way.
Mhm.
And then for small business owners, when you ask this question, what came back to me is this moment when I used to work for the cognitive science lab of Greenpeace, and we were doing a massive audience understanding in Buenos Aires. And these amazing campaigners were working on campaigns for urban people to change their way of being and way of living to become more sustainable. And they never talked on the ground with people. And I remember this morning when I have just asked them to go out without their phones and just look around, just see and sense from a different perspective. And they were all coming back saying like, wow, I've seen so many things in my own city that I have never seen before. And from that, the invitation was that to start having different kind of conversations with the people of Buenos Aires. And that really struck me of how these questions, these human to human connections can be used in understanding your audience, understanding your customers, and building a different kind of relationships to them. Almost like, when I think about small businesses, I think about a lot of community type of business emerging. So how can we start looking at customers more like our community or more like our ambassadors? So all our customers of the Who cards, we think about them more as like the people who want this vision to happen in the road, and we
Mhm.
engage with them in human to human connections so that they can start feeling that they're not just consuming here, and we're shifting that narrative around buyer and seller, but they are becoming an active co-creator of this new reality that we want to see. And I
Mm.
think small and medium-sized businesses are a potential powerhouse to start doing things differently. And I can totally see how meaningful conversations can, start initiating this mindset shift, both from the ownership perspective, but also from the customer perspective.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Makes so much sense. Beautiful.
Mm.
Well, I think everybody wants a set of those cards now. So please tell people where they can find out more about the cards and your work and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, they can come to the whocards.cc webpage, which we probably put into the show descriptions.
I will.
They can read about us, they can order a set of cards, or they can also play it online for free because we don't want money to be a barrier for more meaningful conversations.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You can just go on the website and then there'll be the question of the day. So it's yeah, I use it with my community now. Last time we talked, it was a few months ago. You asked me, so are you using them? And I'm like, not yet, but I will. And so now we started using them in the Humane Marketing Circle. And yeah, it's really great to have the website because um, the community calls are led by ambassadors of the
Mhm.
community, and so they don't each have a set of the cards. But so they just go on the website before the call and they pick the two questions. And so we always have these conversations in breakout rooms with those two questions. And I think, yeah, it just creates such a deeper quality of the call, which then the second half is still marketing and business related. But to have this foundation of, yeah, understanding each other as human beings, it makes everything different. So thank you so much. I have
This is
one
so
last,
beautiful.
yeah, I have one last question about the future. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, what kind of future trends do you see how this could change in companies, for example? Um, does it have to do with creating actual spaces,
Mhm.
or does it have to do with the management? Like, yeah, how do you see this changing in companies, for example?
That's a very, very timely question. We've been doing a lot of research the last couple of months for our B2B offerings. And just yesterday, we came to this beautiful description called a relational design agency. And what we see is that there is a need for more spaces, whether that's online or offline, for people to connect. This is the number one challenge for remote or remote first companies, that
Mm.
the employees are not able to connect with each other.
Right,
But every organization, every conference, every gathering has their own culture, their own DNA. So while we can support them with really interesting questions, we are realizing that there's a need to support them how to bring that into their own culture setting to
right.
really meet where the audiences are. So I see a trend coming up, and we want to put this expression on the market, relational design. It's
Hmm.
somewhere already there, but not so strongly. But we see that, technology and speeded up life is changing how we connect. So we need to start designing these spaces with more awareness and with more consciousness.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it's kind of like this, we're saying that with AI developing, there'll be all these jobs lost, which
Hmm.
is partially true, but there'll also be new jobs related. So maybe, this title of what did you call it? Relational
Relational design.
design. Yeah, relational designer. You're gonna
Mhm.
have, yeah, you have to really design the space for it. Like what's happening in Switzerland right now is, to me, it's crazy. The companies are bringing people back to, from remote back
Mhm.
to the office, which you could say, okay, that will help communication, but obviously people are not happy about it. Uh, but they're bringing them back and they're putting them in open space. And
Mhm.
so people are even less happy about that. So there is a need for a new design, right? Like,
Mhm.
however that looks like, I don't know yet, but we can't just go back to the old and think that will solve the problem. So yeah, I think it's very much needed to have these conversations around, well, how it's great to have the questions, but we need to create the space for it and the time for it as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
great. Well, thank you. Wonderful. Thanks so much for being here and sharing your perspective and all the good work you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Thomas.
Mm.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.